Stray cat leads police to a hidden park secret. What they found changes everything. Officers Lucas and Carla had always taken pride in their work, but after years of patrolling the same streets, the routine had settled into a comforting monotony. It wasn't that they disliked their jobs, far from it. In fact, both of them found immense satisfaction in knowing their work made a difference. They were part of a small, tight-knit police precinct, and the community knew them well. The streets were quiet, crime was low, and their days typically consisted of responding to minor incidents, a missing dog here, a fender bender there, or perhaps a neighbor dispute that would simmer down once both parties were separated and cooled off. If you love animals and want to watch more amazing stories, don't forget to subscribe to help the author. Let's begin. For Lucas, the predictability of his role was a source of comfort. He enjoyed the slow pace, the lack of surprises, and the certainty that his day would end on time. He'd been on the force for nearly a decade, and while the work hadn't been exhilarating or particularly challenging in recent years, it allowed him to keep his head down, follow the rules, and go home to his modest apartment at the end of each shift. There was a certain peace in knowing what to expect every day, in avoiding the unknown. Carla, on the other hand, had grown restless with the quietude of their patrols. Though she didn't admit it to Lucas, she yearned for something more. She'd been a police officer for 5 years and found herself increasingly dissatisfied with the sameness of the job. She loved the community they served, and her colleagues, especially Lucas, were the closest things she had to family. But there were days when she wondered if she was meant for more, if there was something bigger, something more exciting waiting for her. Perhaps the thrill of solving a complex case or making a significant difference in someone's life. But for now, she kept those thoughts to herself, knowing that voicing them could be seen as a lack of dedication. She chose to focus on the present, on the routine, and on the small victories they achieved every day. That afternoon, as their patrol car cruised down Oak Avenue, a street lined with neatly trimmed lawns and picket fences, Lucas felt a deep sense of contentment. The sun was beginning to set, casting an amber glow over the neighborhood. They had just left a routine meeting with the local school's administration about safety protocols, and now they were heading toward the quieter outskirts of town to finish their shift. Lucas glanced at his watch. It was almost time to head back to the precinct. There was nothing to suggest that anything out of the ordinary would happen in the next couple of hours. Carla was the first to notice the cat. It darted across the street in front of them, its fur a mix of tan and white, sleek and unmistakably wild. At first, Carla didn't think much of it. Stray animals were a common sight in this part of town, especially in the late afternoon when the heat of the day began to subside. But then something caught her eye. The cat didn't just scurry away into the bushes like most strays. Instead, it trotted along the sidewalk, eyes locked firmly on their patrol car as if it had a destination in mind. Carla raised an eyebrow. "Did you see that?" she said, glancing over at Lucas. "That cat's not your average stray. It's following us." Lucas chuckled, not quite sure what to make of the situation. "Maybe it's just hungry," he said, his tone dismissive. After all, they had seen countless stray animals wandering the streets, but none of them had followed them for more than a few feet. He turned his attention back to the road, his fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. But the cat was persistent. As they continued down Oak Avenue, it trotted after them, its small, nimble legs keeping up with the car's pace. Carla, now intrigued, turned to her seat to watch it more closely. "That's strange," she muttered, a slight edge to her voice. "It's not slowing down, and it's looking right at us." Lucas, still focused on the road, couldn't help but feel a little amused. Maybe it thinks we're going to feed it. Some of these stray cats get pretty bold when they know there's food around. But Carla wasn't so sure. She had been around animals enough to know that their behavior wasn't always so straightforward. This cat wasn't acting like the others. It wasn't just following them out of curiosity or hunger. It had purpose in its movements, a determination that felt almost intentional. She turned back around in her seat, watching the animal out of the corner of her eye. As they passed the intersection at Maple Street, the cat quickened its pace. It darted ahead of them, then turned onto the sidewalk that led to the nearby park. Carla's eyes widened. "It's leading us somewhere," she said, her voice low with disbelief. "It's actually leading us somewhere, Lucas." Lucas shook his head, not sure what to make of it. "You think? Maybe it's just looking for a place to hide or a good spot to rest." But the cat wasn't heading for any old spot. It seemed to have a specific destination in mind. Curiosity began to get the better of him. He slowed the car, looking at Carla. "You want to follow it? See where it goes?" Carla hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. She wasn't one to indulge in superstitions or believe in strange signs, but there was something about this cat that felt different. "Why not? We're not exactly busy." With a final nod from Lucas, they made a U-turn and slowly drove toward the park where the cat had disappeared. As they entered the park's entrance, they saw the cat pause by the swing set, looking over its shoulder as if waiting for them. Lucas parked the car near the entrance, the engine humming softly as he and Carla got out. They both glanced around. The park was quiet, far quieter than it usually was at this time of day. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the playground. The cat didn't seem to care about the unusual silence. It just stood there, eyes fixated on the playground equipment. "What do you think it wants?" Carla whispered, her eyes scanning the area. "It's not like any stray I've ever seen." "I don't know," Lucas replied, his voice low. "But it's definitely not acting like a normal cat. Let's see where it's going." They followed the cat down a winding path that led toward the playground. The swing set creaked in the breeze, but there were no children playing, no laughter in the air, just the eerie stillness of a park that should have been filled with activity. The cat seemed to move with purpose, its tail flicking slightly as it continued to lead them forward. They passed the jungle gym and a set of slides, then stopped near a large oak tree where the cat abruptly sat down, staring intently at the ground. Carla and Lucas exchanged a look, both wondering what would happen next. "That's it?" Lucas asked, raising an eyebrow. "It just stops here?" But as soon as Carla stepped forward, her foot hit something soft. She bent down, and her heart skipped a beat when she realized what it was: a blanket, partially obscured by the shadows of the oak tree. With trembling hands, she pulled the blanket aside, revealing a small, crying baby wrapped tightly inside. The sound of the baby's wails echoed through the park, sharp and urgent. For a moment, neither officer could move. They just stood there, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. How could a baby end up in a place like this, abandoned and alone? But before they could process the situation, the cat meowed loudly, its gaze still fixed on the baby as if it had done its job and was now ready to move on. Carla gently scooped the baby into her arms, her hands shaking as she checked for signs of injury. The baby's cries softened as she comforted her, but her small form was warm against Carla's chest. "Lucas, we need to get her help. Now." Lucas snapped out of his daze, pulling out his radio. "We've got an emergency. Baby found at the park. No sign of any parents. We need immediate backup and medical assistance." As he spoke, Carla looked down at the baby, her heart aching. The baby had no name, no history, just a blanket and a cry that had been answered by the most unlikely of heroes, a stray cat with a purpose. The officers had unknowingly followed Nina, and now they had a new responsibility to protect the life she had led them to. The ordinary day had just taken a turn into the extraordinary, and the quiet neighborhood they once knew was forever changed. After the strange encounter with the stray cat that led them to the baby in the park, Lucas and Carla were left in a state of shock. Their peaceful, predictable lives had been upended in an instant. For days following the incident, the story of Nina the cat and the baby, whom they named Hope, had been the talk of the town. The media covered it extensively, turning Nina into a local hero. The officers were hailed for their quick thinking and bravery, though they couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into something much bigger than they had ever imagined. But despite the attention and praise, there was an underlying sense of dissatisfaction that began to stir within them, especially for Carla. The routine of their work no longer seemed to offer the fulfillment it once had. It wasn't just the fact that the case had been extraordinary, it was the realization that there was something more to life, something beyond the quiet, uneventful days that had come to define their careers. They had been thrown into a real-life crisis, one that demanded immediate action, and it made them question everything they had grown accustomed to. For Lucas, the pull to stay in his comfortable world remained strong. He had always been content with the predictable nature of his work. He was able to come to work, do his job, and leave without complication. His days were full of routine, patrolling the neighborhood, responding to minor calls, and ensuring the safety of the people around him. This slow-paced life allowed him to remain detached, keeping things simple and straightforward. But after the baby incident, he found himself struggling with an unfamiliar feeling. A sense of yearning had started to take root deep within him, a longing for something more meaningful than the quiet existence he had come to rely on. Carla, on the other hand, felt the yearning more acutely. It wasn't just a fleeting desire. It was a deep, persistent craving for something beyond the ordinary. She had grown disillusioned with the daily grind, feeling like she was capable of more, but never able to break free from the confines of the same old routine. After years of dealing with the same calls, the same complaints, the same calm, predictable days, she couldn't help but wonder if there was something bigger she could do with her life, something that would truly make a difference. She couldn't put her finger on what exactly she was missing, but she felt it, deep in her soul. It wasn't just the praise they received after rescuing Hope that had shaken Carla's sense of satisfaction. It was the way she had felt during the rescue itself. In that moment, everything had been heightened, the fear of not knowing what was going on, the rush of adrenaline, the realization that a life had been saved. She had felt alive in a way that she hadn't in years. For the first time in ages, she had a purpose, a reason for her actions that extended beyond the mundane tasks of her job. And it was that realization, that her life could be more than the routine, that there could be real significance in what she did, that had begun to gnaw at her. Over the next few weeks, as the town continued to buzz with stories of Hope's rescue, Carla found herself distracted. She would show up for work on time, complete her assignments with competence, but the drive that had once fueled her felt muted. Each day, she went through the motions, but it was as though she were simply playing a part in a script that she had long since memorized. She didn't want to just be another officer completing her shift. She wanted to make an impact, to do something that mattered. It wasn't that she didn't enjoy the calm of their usual patrols, she did. The safety of knowing that nothing major would happen allowed her to rest easy at the end of the day. But deep down, she knew that the longing for something more was only growing, and the thought of it scared her. She was terrified of stepping out of the comfortable routine she had come to depend on. What if the unknown led to failure? What if it didn't work out? Lucas could see the change in her, though she tried to hide it. He could tell that Carla's mind was elsewhere, even as they shared the patrol car and drove through their familiar routes. She seemed distracted, lost in thought. And although he didn't understand it fully, he could sense that something inside her had shifted. But the last thing Lucas wanted was to question their easygoing life together. The routine had kept him grounded for so long, and he wasn't sure he was ready to let go of it. But even Lucas couldn't ignore the undercurrent of change that had been bubbling beneath the surface. The world they had once known, the steady, predictable rhythm of the town, was beginning to feel stifling. The routine wasn't as comforting anymore. It had started to feel like a cage, one that they couldn't escape, no matter how much they wanted to. One evening, as they sat in the precinct's break room, Lucas and Carla found themselves talking more openly about their feelings. Carla, feeling the pressure of her inner turmoil, finally spoke up. "You know, Lucas, I've been thinking a lot lately," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "About what happened with the baby. The way we found her, the way Nina led us to her. It wasn't just luck. There was something more to it, something that we were meant to do." Lucas raised an eyebrow, setting down his coffee cup. "What do you mean?" "It was just a call like any other, Carla. We followed protocol, did our job. We got the baby help, and that was it." Carla shook her head. "No, it wasn't just another call. That moment, it meant something. I felt alive, Lucas. I felt like I was really doing something important. And that's what I've been missing. I've been doing the same things for so long that I don't even know what I really want anymore. But I know I want more than this." Lucas frowned, unsure of how to respond. I don't know what you mean. Things are fine the way they are. You're doing good work here. I'm content with it. Carla looked at him, her expression softening. I know you are, and I'm glad you're happy with it. But I don't think I am anymore. I need to do something that makes a real difference. Something that gives me purpose. Lucas felt a pang of guilt. He had always prided himself on being the steady, dependable one. The one who never rocked the boat, who kept things on an even keel. But now, with Carla's words hanging in the air, he realized just how much he had avoided confronting his own desires. He had been running on autopilot for so long that he hadn't stopped to question if this was really the life he wanted. I don't know what to say, Carla, Lucas admitted, his voice quieter now. I've never really thought about it. I've always just done the job, and that's enough for me. I don't need much beyond that. Carla gave a sad smile. I get it, but I don't want to keep going through the motions. I want to feel like what I do matters. Like I'm not just another officer doing the same thing every day. I want something bigger, something that makes me feel like I'm part of something important. The conversation hung in the air for a long while, the weight of it pressing down on both of them. Carla had said what was on her mind, and though Lucas hadn't voiced his own feelings yet, he knew deep down that he was no longer sure what he wanted. The feeling of safety and comfort that had once sustained him was no longer enough. But could he take the leap? Could he step into the unknown, where life wasn't as predictable, where the stakes were higher? Carla's words had planted a seed in his mind, a seed that began to grow as the days passed. There was a part of him, small but undeniable, that longed for something more, something meaningful. But how could he let go of the comfort he had built for himself, the life that had allowed him to avoid the complications of uncertainty? The search for what they wanted was only just beginning. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were both standing at the edge of a decision, a choice that would lead them to paths they hadn't expected. Their desire for something more, something greater than the routine, would push them forward, and perhaps lead them to the very thing they didn't know they needed. As the weeks passed, Lucas and Carla found themselves increasingly caught in a swirl of conflicting emotions. The routine of their patrols, the ever-present hum of the city, the endless calls to respond to minor incidents, nothing seemed to offer the satisfaction it once had. Their world, which had once felt predictable and safe, was now filled with questions and unease. It wasn't just the story of hope that had shaken them, but the dawning realization that their lives were lacking something deeper. Something beyond the humdrum of everyday police work. Something they both had been afraid to confront until now. For Carla, the breaking point came one evening when she was finishing her shift and stared out the window of the precinct, lost in thought. The sunset cast an orange glow over the town, and the streetlights flickered to life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the world outside was passing her by. She longed for adventure, for purpose, for something that would jolt her out of the monotony. It was in that moment that the idea struck her, an idea that, in hindsight, seemed both absurd and exhilarating. What if we took on something bigger? She thought aloud. The idea had been brewing for some time, but it had never fully formed until that instant. What if they could break out of their routine, step into the unknown, and embark on a journey that would change everything? A part of her knew that doing so would feel reckless, an abandonment of everything they had known, a departure from the safety they had relied on for so long. But she couldn't shake the urge to explore that possibility. What if the unknown held the answers they were both searching for? Drop everything and go off on some wild adventure. We've got responsibilities here. What if something happens? What if we're needed? Carla's eyes narrowed. She understood his hesitation, but she also knew they couldn't keep living in a world where everything was decided by fear and routine. That's exactly it, Lucas. What if we're not needed for a few days? What if it's okay to step away? Life doesn't have to be a series of calls and responses. We can take control of our own story. The tension in the room was palpable. Lucas was accustomed to the certainty of their daily duties. The steady rhythm of their work was what grounded him, what made him feel secure. Discussions came to a head one evening when they sat together in the small apartment that had become their temporary home. The silence between them was thick, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Carla broke the silence. "I think we should do it, Lucas," she said quietly. "We're the ones who found her. We're the ones who can give her the life she deserves." Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I want it, Carla. I really do. But I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I can be the kind of parent she needs." Carla reached out, placing her hand on his. "We don't have to have all the answers right now. We can figure it out as we go. But I truly believe that we were meant to find her and that she was meant to be part of our lives." Lucas looked at her, searching her face for the certainty he didn't feel himself. "I know," he said softly, "but I'm scared. I'm scared of not being good enough. I'm scared of failing her." Carla squeezed his hand. "We're in this together. We'll figure it out. And if we make mistakes, we'll fix them. We're not perfect, but we can give her everything we have. That's all that matters." And in that moment, Lucas realized that Carla was right. They didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to have it all figured out. What mattered was that they had a chance to give Hope a future filled with love, with stability, with a family that would be there for her no matter what. The decision was made. They would adopt Hope. They would be her parents, and they would give her the life she deserved. For Lucas, the decision was a step into the unknown, a leap of faith into a future that he couldn't yet see clearly. But it was a future he was willing to embrace, knowing that whatever came their way, they would face it together. Hope had changed everything for them. She had given them purpose, direction, and a reason to move forward. In rescuing her, they had found the family they never knew they needed. And though the journey ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges and uncertainties, Lucas and Carla knew one thing for sure. They had found something more valuable than any adventure, any story of heroism, or any recognition. They had found each other, and they had found hope. And that was more than enough. Despite the overwhelming sense of accomplishment that had initially come with rescuing Hope, the months that followed proved to be a sobering reminder that life, especially one as unpredictable as theirs had become, wasn't without its costs. Lucas and Carla had made the decision to adopt Hope, believing it was the right thing to do. But they soon realized that their choice came with consequences, some they had anticipated, but others that would leave them questioning whether they had made the right decision at all. In the beginning, the transition to parenthood had felt like an adventure. Hope had brought a sense of purpose and fulfillment to their lives that they had both been craving. She was a sweet, bright baby, full of life and curiosity, and Lucas and Carla had dedicated themselves wholeheartedly to raising her. The community, too, had embraced their decision, praising them for stepping into the role of parents with such grace and love. But as the months wore on, cracks began to appear in the facade of their seemingly perfect family. One of the first challenges they faced was the pressure of balancing their roles as parents with their jobs. Lucas and Carla had both been passionate about their work as police officers, but now they found themselves struggling to manage their professional responsibilities while ensuring that Hope was cared for. The late-night shifts, the unpredictable hours, and the constant stress of their jobs began to take a toll on their personal lives. Carla, who had always been the more idealistic of the two, was the first to feel the weight of the pressure. She had envisioned herself as a mother who could juggle both her career and family life with ease, but she soon found that the reality was far more difficult than she had imagined. She would come home after long shifts to find Hope crying or in need of attention, exhausted from the demands of being a new parent. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion, it was the emotional strain of feeling like she was constantly letting someone down. For Lucas, the pressure manifested in a different way. He was a man of action, someone who thrived on solving problems and being in control. But when it came to Hope, he found that he couldn't always fix things. He couldn't always make her stop crying, couldn't always calm her when she was upset, and couldn't always be there when she needed him most. It was a humbling experience, and it left him feeling inadequate, unsure of his ability to be the father Hope deserved. The guilt gnawed at him, making him question whether he was truly cut out for the role he had chosen. As the stress began to mount, so did the tension between them. They had always been close, relying on each other for support and understanding. But now, it seemed as if their differences were becoming more pronounced. Carla would grow frustrated with Lucas when he didn't seem to understand the level of exhaustion she was feeling, and Lucas would withdraw when he felt like he was failing as a father. Their communication, once open and honest, began to break down as they both struggled to adapt to the changes in their lives. The tension reached a breaking point one evening when Lucas came home after a particularly grueling shift. He was exhausted, his mind preoccupied with the cases he had been working on, and the last thing he wanted was to deal with more stress. Carla, on the other hand, was at her wit's end, having spent the entire day trying to calm a fussy Hope. The house was a mess, the baby was crying, and Carla was teetering on the edge of exhaustion. "Can you just help out for once?" Carla snapped as soon as Lucas walked in the door, her voice thick with frustration. Lucas stood in the doorway, momentarily taken aback by her tone. "What do you mean? I've been working all day. I'm tired too, you know." Carla's eyes flashed with irritation. "You don't get it, do you? You come home, you think everything's fine, but I've been dealing with this all day. I can't do it all on my own." Lucas sighed, his own frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm not saying you're doing it on your own, Carla, but I've got my own stuff to deal with too. I'm trying here." The argument spiraled quickly, each of them feeling misunderstood and unappreciated. It was the kind of fight that had been building for weeks, a culmination of their mounting stress and the unspoken resentment that had started to creep in. They had both been so focused on Hope and the external pressures of parenthood that they had neglected to take care of their relationship, of each other. After the fight, the air between them was thick with tension. Carla went to bed early, and Lucas, unable to sleep, sat up in the living room, replaying the argument in his head. The thought of losing Carla, of their marriage unraveling.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.